In the next 20 minutes, we're going to explore this idea of indestructible success, but particularly we're going to explore a particular facet of this idea called leadership. Now, before we go any further, how many of you are familiar with this statement, namaste? Show of hands. I behold the divine in you. Well, there's an updated version. I don't know if you know about this. It's called the fist bump. It looks like this here. Booyah! That's kind of how that goes. You know, in some places, it means the same thing. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah! It's Carl Anthony. Come on. Indestructible Success, the Spiritual Foundation, a talk that I've had the opportunity to give all across the U.S. and Canada. Today, I'm going to put some context around the talk today with that message, Indestructible Success, the Spiritual Foundation, because what I want to share with you today is about leadership and service and how that plays into success. And there are going to be three elements to what I'd like to share with you. The first is to share with you some stories from my own life about leadership and service. Then you're going to hear some stories from right here at Unity Church of Overland Park. Then you're going to hear how stepping into service and stepping into leadership provides you with benefit, with spiritual growth, with prospering. First, I'm going to give the 20-minute talk on Indestructible Success, the Spiritual Foundation, in 2.5 minutes. Spiritual growth is dependent on three elements: spiritual teachers, spiritual teachings, and a spiritual community. I didn't make that up, by the way. That's classic Buddhism. It's called the three treasures. And in Buddhism, it's called the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha means the teacher. The teachings are books, sutras, verses, songs, art, anything left over by people who've had a realized state and left us something to study. And Sangha is spiritual community. Now in Unity, we talk about that as the teacher within. Oftentimes, we're encouraged through A Course in Miracles or other courses of study to look for and find that teacher within the silence. The practice that we do in Unity is prayer and meditation. And we come together in community as people who practice these paths. So far, so good. Let me see a show of hands if this is on the right track. Okay, good. So indestructible success starts with getting filled up by having a relationship with a teacher, teachings, and a spiritual community. And you start to feel good. You start to get filled up. And when you start to get filled up and feel good, you come over into what I call creative process. Creative process is when you have an idea and you want to make it real. You create a song. You improve your relationship. You change your life in some meaningful way. It doesn't have to be an art thing. It can be. Creative process where you get an idea, you have a dream, you have a vision, you start to tell people about your vision, you write it down, you set some goals, you make some plans, you take some action, you fall down, you get back up, you fall down again, you get back up, and you get some results. It's a creative process. I love creative process. I'm into it. I love writing songs. I love writing books. I love making things happen. Gardens, children, ministry. Just have an idea and then make it real. How many of you are into that? Just like, I like making things happen. So you can dig what I'm saying. Which leads us to step 3 of indestructible success. You come through here, and success is defined in 2 ways in Webster's. Number one, the ability to achieve the outcome in which you endeavor to achieve. This is the first definition of success. And it makes sense. If you're over here and you got filled up, you're feeling good, you feel inspired, you've been nourished, your soul is fed, you come over here, you got some creative process, you have an idea, you make it real, and then you come over here, and it's the natural outpicturing. You achieved the outcome that you endeavored to achieve from the inspiration. The second definition of success in Webster's is the attainment of profit, status, and people liking you. Now that's where we get messed up. I shift my aim to, I'm going to do this for the money, the status, and people are going to like me. I'm going to be important. We lose this whole line over here. We get disconnected from the creative process. The creativity dries up. You lose your soul, dries up. And this was verified. I found this out after the first service. You end up with a bunch of stuff in your basement that you have to sell on Craigslist. It's true. People came up to me and were like, yep, that's true. That happened. So we get confused over here about the success piece. It's right here that we lose which one? Which one am I going for? Because if you go for the one that's about, I'm in this to do my best and follow through to the outcome, I'm not going to be attached to the wall being built and people liking it. I'm just going to lay this one brick right now today as perfectly as I can lay this brick and do what I'm doing now well without attachment to the outcome. Then the status and the praise and the money and everything else comes, but you're not attached to it. That's what we're about here in Unity, is this process of being able to have success with a spiritual foundation. And this is indestructible success, because if you're here and you're filled, you're about giving. You're about bringing something to the world. You're not attached to getting something. You're filled up and thinking, I want to give something. And that's indestructible success in 4 minutes and 25 seconds. And I share that with you to give the context because I'm curious on how we get this part over here to work. How does the spiritual community part function? Because it's essential to your spiritual growth. How does that work? Now, I promised you I'd share a story or two from my own experience of leadership and service. Last weekend, Saturday, I went to Iowa State Penitentiary. I was the guest keynote speaker. Very unusual experience. I speak at a lot of Unity churches. I speak at a lot of conferences, associations. This was different. This was different than it is right now. It's very different than speaking to you. I have my suit on. I'm a little nervous. Shared in the first service today about my nervousness because I'd never been to a maximum security prison before. I didn't know what to expect. I did a lot of research, but it was still an unknown experience. They didn't have my name on the list when I got there. You know, I've been to parties and like Miami Beach and like clubs and things, and sometimes you can kind of finagle your way in. Not at a maximum security prison. No. Fortunately, the warden walked in, and he was going to attend, and he said, are you with the Toastmasters group? And we said, yes. And he said, let him in. And then people got out of the way. How many of you are familiar with Toastmasters, by the way? It's a volunteer organization dedicated to communication and leadership. So here we are. We're walking through, and the building, stone and iron, basically, the oldest state building in Iowa, 1849. Yeah, 1849. Gothic, intimidating. Walking in, iron. I'm not so nervous, though, because I'm walking in with the warden. I'm feeling like, hey, if there's anybody you want to be with at a maximum security prison, the warden's the guy. And we stop in the courtyard, and I don't know how the weather was. I know how the weather was here. That's just the thing a speaker says to engage the audience. I don't know how the weather was here in Kansas, but it was hot. That's how the weather was here, everywhere in the Midwest last weekend. It was 102 in southeastern Iowa. Now, I have a suit on. I have dress slacks and socks and shoes and a tie and a collar and a long-sleeve shirt. The warden's wearing a T-shirt. It's an upscale department store T-shirt, but it's still a T-shirt. Said in my invitation said, dress elegantly because this is a very high-class event in the maximum security prison. I was, okay, I'll wear a suit. So I walk in, there's more iron, there's more rock, go down, descend into the basement, in the steps, and into the chapel. And the chapel is tile floors and cinder block walls and no air conditioning for 4 hours. I didn't care. Did not care at all because I was so lit up. I was just immersed in the experience of seeing people, listening to people, being with people without my story about who they were. Being able to behold the Christ in each individual. To be listening to their stories, to be telling my story, to be giving my gift, to speak, to have prepared, to deliver a talk that was inspiring and uplifting. I left feeling elated. I left feeling completely filled up, like my heart had just taken a really good protein shake, supplement kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about? You take one of those and you feel like, yeah. Like I got one of those in my heart, my subtle body, the subtle body, the mind, the emotional, the mental body, the body that we can't measure with instruments but is very real, how we feel and how we think. I left there just feeling great. Now, maybe I felt great because I was the guest of honor and I got to go first in line for the banquet. And they gave me a plaque. But that's not it. I mean, it is kind of cool to have a banquet in a maximum security prison. You know how hard it is for these guys to pull off a banquet? It's not easy. Plastic silverware, definitely. Imagine, if you will, sometimes you do things in your church community. You put on events, and you get together with a committee, and you want to pull together something here. But just imagine it with snipers in towers strategically located around the sanctuary, and warring factions of different cliques and gangs and groups that you have to keep a balance with at any given time. Oh, and then there's lockdown. Lockdown could happen. You could be just going around your thing, and some knucklehead messes it up, and the whole place is locked down for 2 weeks. So they had this amazing event, but that's not why I felt inspired that they did all this work. I felt inspired and uplifted and filled because I was giving. I was in the process of giving, and it was being received, and that helps us to feel what? So I had this experience. Now, I also thought, well, maybe I'm the one who got everything out of this. I got to speak and give my gift, and I feel great, and it was honored and appreciated. But you know what? It was the prisoners who are participating in this organization who really got the best gift, because they got to be of service. They got to step into that circuit of giving. They got to step into that flow where they were being of leadership, of service, of opening, of contribution. So they're the ones who really got the benefit. In preparation for this talk, I interviewed some folks. I asked them questions. Overland Park. Why is it so cool? Now, you know that people in the New Thought movement, a lot of people in Unity, look at Overland Park as a great place to be. That's the place to be. How many of you know this? Give yourself just a little pat right here. So I started to ask some questions. I wanted to find out, why is this the case? I'm going to share with you something that I didn't share in the first service, something that I noticed that was very important, because I tried to contact Reverend Patricia. It's like, well, I want to ask her what's cool about it. And Betsy and Reverend Eileen were like, we'll tell you. Now, why was this important? It's because when you have leadership, you don't want the leader interrupted by every speaker who comes on a Sunday to get to ask her questions. She's got things to do, people. I was working with a client just last week. He runs a huge Parks and Rec, and he had constantly people asking him about the barbecue on 4th of July. What about the cups? Should we get these cups or these cups? Should we put the thing here or there? I said, yo, the leader, the person who's at the executive position running has to make bigger decisions than what kind of cups to get. So I appreciated that when I was like, hey, I'd like to ask Reverend Patricia. They said, no, Reverend Eileen. Because it means that the whole thing is working. It's working well. It means that there are people taking responsibility for their domain of responsibility. By the way, I'm working with this guy at the Parks and Rec, and I'm like, hey, dude, let's just spend some time over here looking at the $15 million new physical plant that you need to make some decisions about. Have you thought about that this week? Because your committee is thinking about it. And in 5 minutes, we were on the phone, and we set up a meeting for him to get $25,000. Just like that. That's what's important in leadership, is knowing what place you play and who needs to play which role. Now, what I did share this morning, and I'll share again, is the theme that came up from each individual, from talking with Betsy, with Reverend Eileen, with Deb, and with Blake. First question that I asked was, well, why is Overland Park cool? Why does it work? Everybody gave me the same answer. The first time was prayer. We pray. Okay, check, prayer, unity, got it. Second time, well, Seth, everything, it was actually an email. Everything we do here is permeated with prayer. I was like, okay, prayer, yep, check, new thought, prayer, it's good. And I was talking to Deb, and I said, so Deb, what makes it cool? Deb said, well, I'd have to say that, everything we do begins, everything really here, Seth, begins with prayer. It's like, yeah, prayer, got that, I know. Yep, unity, prayer, that makes sense. Okay. On the phone with Blake. Blake, so what makes unity of Overland Park cool? What's the underlying thing here that makes it a really high-functioning, great place to be? Seth, I think the thing that works here about the Unity Church of Overland Park is the prayer. Now, at that, it's like, you ever see the Blues Brothers? Anybody ever see the Blues Brothers, the movie The Blues Brothers? It's worth seeing. It's worth seeing. There's this moment where Jake Blues is in a church, and James Brown is the minister. And James Brown says to him, have you seen the light? And Jake is shaking in the back. Have you seen? That's what happened to me in that moment. Because Blake said, well, Seth, everything happens with prayer. I was like, prayer! Oh! Whoa! Prayer. Yeah, that's deep. That's deep. Really? Because I realized I wasn't really doing that in my life. So last Friday, I got with my executive assistant. Every Friday, we do a business meeting. I said, we're going to pray. What a concept. So we put in, we put affirmative prayer into our weekly business meetings. I said to my wife and kids, hey, we ought to be praying more often together as a family. My 7-year-old looked up at me and was like, nah. The second piece that was shared with me, everybody said the same thing, vision and mission. The church community, the ministry here actually dusts off the mission statement and the vision statement, and it's part of everything. It's part of where the choices are made. Is this aligned with our mission? Is this part of our vision? Another piece that was consistent throughout all the conversations was the ministerial team, the staff, the board, the volunteers. There's something like one gross of prayer chaplains, like 144. There's like a ton of prayer chaplains here, people who've been involved with the ministry. I think there are 49 people who've gone through prayer chaplaincy and are holding that, whether they're active or not, are holding that state of prayer. So that there is this huge fabric of people doing good work here. So as we kind of move towards wrapping up for today, it leads us to our third point. Our third point is, so what's in it for you? What's in it for you to be involved with ministry, to be involved with service, to be involved with leadership? Which brings me back to a story about me, which I told you I'd tell you a few about. I got started in Unity when I was 19 years old because I was sick, I was tired, my life wasn't working, there were problem-oriented experiences, and I got involved with Unity. I got involved with Unity even though I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian church. And as a result of that, I had an allergy to the words Jesus and God. I literally would sit in services at Unity, and then every time I heard the word Jesus, I went like this. But something was good about it. How many of you had that experience, come to a service and you feel better when you leave? It's designed that way. It's designed to be a healing ministry. So I was coming in, I was actually leaving feeling physically better. It was like, oh, this is cool. I come in feeling sick, I leave feeling better. I'm going to keep coming, I'm going to keep attending. Because when you're sick and you're tired and your life isn't working and you're suffering, other people's opinions about what's true or not true stop mattering. What really you're looking for is some well-being. That's my experience. So I came in. While I was there, I was sitting where you're sitting now, and someone said, we need someone for Sunday school. We need someone to step up in leadership in Sunday school. Okay. I think I was 20 by that time. I had hair down to my butt. I wore bell bottoms. It was fun. I stepped up in leadership, and that's where I started, because I just thought, it just makes sense if I want my life to work better, to step up and start helping other people. It just was a truth that resonated for me. I didn't think I'd be speaking to you here today at Overland Park when I started volunteering at Sunday school. I had no idea I'd be involved with ministry. Unity has been a freaking blessing, man. It's been cool ever since the start. So you come back over here. What's in it for you? When you put yourself in a position of service and leadership, you actually begin to put yourself in a circuit. When I was speaking to folks here, the theme came up about permeating your life with the prayerful consciousness that is held here in the ministry. So by stepping into leadership, you get to immerse yourself. The subtle body gets to be filled with more joy, start to vibrate. You get to immerse yourself in a prayerful consciousness. You begin to see habits and practices that could benefit you in other areas of your life, and that begins to fold over. And the word was, you don't get overshadowed, was what was shared with me. The circumstances of your life cease to overshadow you because you're filled with this consistent awareness and consciousness that I am that I am. Christ in you, the hope of glory. The truth about you begins to become greater. You become magnanimous. And this is how I'd like to close for today. Recapping the main points. We talked about indestructible success. You come over here, you get filled up, you feel good. When you feel good, you feel inspired, you want to create something, you create something good, put it out there, and that leads to success. You achieve your outcome, and then as a result of that, you end up getting some cool praise and some money and some other things, which are great too. And we looked at what's leadership, how do we get this, and leadership. I shared some stories, the prison and Sunday school. Opposite sides of the spectrum. We talked about what's going on here at Unity Church of Overland Park, and we talked about what's in it for you, that when you step into leadership and service and ministry, that it uplifts your life. You become magnanimous. You become bigger than the circumstances of your life. And this is what I'd like to leave you with today, is as you begin to be filled with the Spirit and you begin to know who you are, you become more powerful. And when you become more powerful, you can do more good. And when you do more good, you're more powerful, you're more healthy, you're more energized, you're more prosperous. It's good for you, and it's good for your family, and it's good for your community, and it's good for the world. So the better your life is, the better things are working for you, the better it is for everybody everywhere. How many of you are into that? Say, yeah. And when you're coming over here and you spend more time in ministry, something happens to your subtle body. You get a good feeling. You start. How many of you know Snoopy? Snoopy? The Peanuts? Snoopy dance? Anybody know the Snoopy dance? Yeah, the Snoopy dance, thank you for demonstrating. The Snoopy dance happens in your subtle body. Your emotional and mental place. And what I'd like to leave you with is what you get when you step up to serve is a subtle body Snoopy dance. Looks like this. And that is when I'd like to, thank you. That's when I'd like to invite back up Reverend Eileen, because it's time to look within your wallet and to dig deep.
Bring him back in.